I want you to just take a second and look around your current environment. Like, seriously, take a good look at the screen you're staring at right now.
Yeah, just take it all in.
Right. Think about the concrete foundation you are sitting above, or, the paved road right outside your door. Look at the windows letting the light into your room.
It's quite literally everywhere.
Exactly. Every single one of those things. I mean, the screen, the foundation, the glass, the literal infrastructure of your daily life, it all comes from the exact same completely ordinary and completely overlooked material.
It is genuinely hiding in plain sight. We are completely surrounded by it, but, well, because it's everywhere, it has become totally invisible to us.
And that is our mission for today's deep dive. We are going to completely change how you view the ground beneath your feet. We are unpacking the story of sand.
Yes, sand.
And we are going to take a journey from the physical reality of a single tiny grain all the way to, like, the philosophical meaning of human civilization itself.
It's a big journey.
It really is. So, okay, let's unpack this, because I want to start by dropping a fact that absolutely bit my mind when I started looking into the research for this. Sand is the second most used resource on Earth, right after water.
It's a staggering statistic, isn't it?
I mean, yeah.
When you hear the word resources, your brain usually jumps to, oil or coal or timber.
Right, things we burn or cut down.
Exactly. You don't think about the dirt at the beach. But humanity consumes roughly 50 billion tons of sand and gravel every single year.
50 billion. That's just, I can't even picture that.
It's almost impossible to picture. But sand isn't just a byproduct of nature. It is the hidden foundation of everything. If you look at it through a geological lens, sand is Earth's memory, basically broken into pieces.
Oh, wow. Earth's memory broken into pieces. I love that.
Yeah, and humanity has taken those ancient fragmented pieces and used them to build permanence out of impermanence.
That is such a cool concept. But to really understand how sand built the modern world, we first have to, well, completely unlearn what we think sand actually is.
Right, because most people have a very specific image in their head.
Exactly. So let's look at the physical and geological reality. Because scientifically speaking, sand isn't actually a specific substance at all, is it?
No, it's really not. And that's the first major misconception we have to tackle.
Okay, lay it on me.
Unlike gold or copper, which are specific chemical elements, or even quartz, which is a defined mineral, the word sand is defined purely by a grain size category.
So it's just about size.
Entirely. In sedimentology, to be classified as sand, a loose particle simply has to measure between 0.0625 millimeters and 2 millimeters in diameter.
Wait, 0.0625 millimeters. That is ridiculously specific.
It is, but that's the threshold.
So if it's anything smaller than 0.0625 millimeters, what is it?
Then it's silt.
Silt. And anything larger than 2 millimeters?
That would be gravel.
Gravel. Okay, so it's entirely about dimensions. It has nothing to do with what the material is actually made of.
Precisely.
That immediately makes me think of airline carry-on luggage.
Oh, how so?
Like, you go to the airport, and the airline has that little metal sizing bin sitting right there at the gate.
Oh, right. The dreaded sizer.
Exactly.
Oh.
And it does not matter what is inside your bag. You could have bags stuffed entirely with soft clothes, or, a bag full of dense, heavy books, or even fragile camera electronics.
Right. They don't check the contents at the gate.
No. The airline doesn't care about the internal composition. If the bag fits inside that specific dimensional frame, it gets categorized as a carry-on.
That is a brilliant analogy.
Thanks. So sand works the exact same way. If a fragment of material fits between 0.0625 and 2 millimeters, geology just slaps a label on it and categorizes it as sand.
That's exactly how it works. And because of that dimensional rule, the clothes and books inside the luggage, the actual composition of the sand, it can vary wildly depending on where you are on the planet.
So what are we usually walking on when we go to the beach?
Well, most of the familiar beach sand we interact with, say on the coast of North America or Europe, is quartz-rich.
Okay, quartz.
But depending on the local geology, sand can be made of volcanic glass, which gives you those famous black sand beaches in Iceland or Hawaii.
Oh, I've seen pictures of those. They're stunning.
They are. Or it can be made of pulverized coral or shell debris in tropical areas, which we call carbonate sand.
So when you're in the Caribbean, you're basically walking on crushed shells.
Pretty much. In some places, it's basalt or heavy minerals like magnetite, or even pure gypsum, like you see in the white sands of New Mexico.
But the journey to get to that specific 2 millimeter size, I was reading about the timeline of this, and it's Basically the slow violence of geology. It's brutal.
It really is a violent process. It's just operating on a timescale we can't easily perceive.
Right, because we don't live for millions of years.
Exactly. A single grain of sand is basically a biography in miniature. It takes millions of years of physical and chemical weathering to create it.
Walk me through that. How does a mountain become a beach?
Imagine a massive granite mountain peak. First, you have freeze-thaw cycles, where water seeps into microscopic cracks in the rock, freezes, expands, and literally shatters the boulder apart.
Just blowing it open from the inside.
Yes. Then you have massive glaciers grinding those boulders down into powder. Then gravity and rain wash those fragments into rivers where they tumble and crush against each other for hundreds, sometimes thousands of miles.
Plus, there's chemical weathering too, right? Like the water itself is slowly dissolving parts of the rock as it moves.
Absolutely. Slightly acidic rainwater and carbon dioxide dissolve the weaker minerals like feldspar or mica.
And they just disappear.
They turn into soft clays that basically just wash away in the current.
Wow. It's just relentless. But out of all those different materials that can become sand, quartz is the undisputed king.
Oh, without a doubt.
It's the most common, and commercially, I know it's most important. But why? Why does quartz survive when everything else turns to mush?
What's fascinating here is that the dominance of quartz comes down entirely to its chemistry.
Okay, chemistry time.
Quartz is silicon dioxide. That's one silicon atom and two oxygen atoms. And it consists of silicon and oxygen locked together in a covalently bonded tetrahedral crystal structure.
Okay, hold on. Covalently bonded tetrahedral crystal structure.
It's a mouthful.
It is.
Yeah.
Break that down for me. What does that actually mean for the physical grain tumbling down a river?
Think of it like architectural scaffolding.
Okay.
Instead of the atoms stacking flat on top of each other like loose bricks, which can easily slide apart, the silicon and oxygen atoms in quartz lock arms in a three-dimensional pyramid grid.
So they're all interconnected.
Yes. Every atom is tightly bound to its neighbors in multiple directions. There are no natural weak points, no fault lines for the structure to easily break along.
So it's like a molecular fortress.
Exactly. On the Mohs scale of hardness, where a diamond is a 10, quartz is a very solid 7.
That's pretty tough.
It is. Those strong covalent bonds give it incredible chemical stability and resistance to corrosion. While other, weaker minerals dissolve or break down into clay during that multi-million-year geological journey down the river, quartz survives.
It just takes the beating and keeps going.
It resists the weathering. So by the time all that sediment finally reaches the ocean, the weaker stuff has completely vanished and the quartz has accumulated. It's basically the ultimate geological survivor.
Which brings us to a massive paradox. Because if quartz survives, it piles up, and it becomes sand. And we know deserts are absolutely covered in this stuff.
Endless oceans of it.
Right. The Sahara, the Arabian Peninsula, Gobi. But here's something from the research that totally broke my brain. Desert nations, which are literally drowning in sand, regularly have to import construction sand from other countries.
It sounds like a joke, doesn't it?
It does. Why on earth is Saudi Arabia or the UAE buying sand from halfway across the world? How is that even economically or physically possible?
It sounds totally absurd. You have an ocean of sand in your backyard, but you can't use it to build your own cities. But it comes down to the physics of grain shape.
Shape, not size.
Shape, which is completely dictated by how the sand was transported.
Okay, explain that.
In a desert, sand is moved by the wind. And over thousands and thousands of years, wind blows those grains against each other, polishing them. The friction knocks off all the rough edges until every single grain becomes incredibly smooth and almost perfectly round.
Like microscopic ball bearings.
Precisely. Now, compare that to river sand or beach sand. Those grains are transported by water.
And water acts differently.
Water actually cushions the grains. So while they do break down and get smaller, they remain angular. They keep their jagged, irregular edges.
Okay, so river sand is jagged, desert sand is smooth.
Right. Now think about what happens when humans want to make strong concrete. They need sand to act as the filler, the aggregate that binds with the cement paste and the larger gravel.
Ah, I see where this is going. If you try to mix cement with smooth, round desert sand,
The grains just slide right past each other.
they have absolutely no grip.
None at all.
It's like trying to build a stable tower out of smooth glass marbles. You just can't bind them together.
Yeah.
The structure would just collapse under its own weight.
Exactly. But if you use river sand, those jagged, angular pieces act like microscopic Velcro.
Microscopic Velcro. I like that.
They interlock, they catch on to each other, and they give the concrete its incredible structural integrity.
Sure.
So a country covered in desert sand might have billions of tons of material, but for the purposes of modern construction, it is completely useless.
Unbelievable.
They are literally forced to import river or marine sand from places like Australia or Canada just to build a concrete foundation in Dubai.
That is wild. The very shape of the grain, I mean, whether it was carried by wind or carried by water, literally dictates global trade and human history.
It really does.
Because this physical reality, the need for that jagged, angular grip, directly dictates how humans have used sand to essentially conquer the globe. So let's trace that timeline. How did we go from just finding this stuff on riverbanks to, using it to build the digital age?
That historical arc is incredible. For early humans, sand was just a basic local utility.
Like what?
They used it as an abrasive for polishing tools, or they mixed it into clay for tempering pottery so it wouldn't crack in the fire. It was just seasonal local labor.
So nothing crazy.
Right. But around 4,000 years ago in Mesopotamia, everything changed. That was the first great technological revolution of sand.
The invention of glass.
Right. Craftspeople realized that if you took silica-rich sand, quartz sand, and heated it to extreme temperatures, it melted into a transparent, amorphous solid.
Oh, wait, you said quartz is super tough.
It is. Quartz melts at an incredibly high temperature, around 1,700 degrees Celsius, which ancient kilns just couldn't reach.
So how did they do it? How did they melt it?
They figured out that adding alkalis like plant ash or natron dramatically lowered the melting point.
Oh, wow.
They effectively learned how to hack the chemistry of sand. They turned opaque dirt into transparent glass.
And that one discovery just echoes through centuries. First, it was luxury beads and ritual objects in Egypt and Mesopotamia. But then you look at the Roman Empire.
Oh, the Romans were masters of it.
Right. They didn't just use sand for glass. They figured out the aggregate game we just talked about.
Mm-hmm.
They mixed sand, volcanic ash, and water to create Roman concrete.
And not just any volcanic ash. Pozzolana.
Pozzolana.
Yes. When you mix pozzolana ash with lime and angular sand, you get a chemical reaction that creates a concrete that can actually set underwater.
Wait, really? Underwater?
Yes. That was a superpower. It allowed the Romans to build massive harbor breakwaters, aqueducts that span valleys, domes like the Pantheon, and vast networks of bathhouses.
So it wasn't just about making buildings.
For Rome, concrete wasn't just a building material. It was a mechanism of empire. It allowed them to project power, move militaries, and administer taxes across vast distances.
And then you fast forward to the Industrial Revolution.
Uh-huh.
We needed foundry sand to create molds for mass metal casting.
Right, the casting process.
Yeah, you pack wet sand around a wooden shape, remove the wood, pour in molten iron, and boom, you have an engine block. We needed sand to build the railways, the bridges, the factory windows, and then, well, the digital revolution.
The big one.
I have to stop here because this is the leap that always gets me. We literally turned dirt into the internet.
Yes, quite literally.
I mean, tracing the arc, it's almost poetic. Sand became glass. Glass was refined by craftspeople in places like Murano, Italy. Then we realized you could curve that glass to make lenses.
Lenses changed everything.
They gave us telescopes and microscopes, which entirely changed human science. We could suddenly see the moons of Jupiter and the cells in our own blood. And then eventually, we figured out how to take high-purity silica sand, chemically reduce it to pure silicon, and slice it into wafers.
The silicon chip, the foundation of transistors, integrated circuits, computers, and smartphones.
It's all sand.
To get there, you have to take incredibly pure quartz sand, strip away the oxygen using carbon in an electric arc furnace, and you are left with metallurgical-grade silicon.
Okay.
Then you purify it even further until it is 99.999999% pure, melt it down, and grow a single, perfect cylindrical crystal of silicon. You slice that cylinder into wafers, and that is where you etch your microchips.
So my smartphone is basically a highly refined rock.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, sand acts as the ultimate enabler of civilization. In the 20th century, concrete became the literal language of modernization.
Everywhere you look.
Exactly. Every highway, every hospital, every skyscraper is just a sand deposit rearranged vertically. But what's crucial to understand is the shift in scale.
What do you mean?
Historically, raw sand is heavy and cheap, so it was always a local resource. You built your village out of the sand from the nearby river. But sand technology, like Murano glass in the medieval period or silicon chips today, became completely global.
I want to pause just to remind you, the listener, how heavily your life relies on this. Without sand, modern life is unrecognizable. It gave humanity transparency through windows, shelter through concrete, and computation through silicon. We completely transformed geology into infrastructure and information.
But there is a massive catch to all of this progress.
Yeah, here it comes.
Turning geology into infrastructure and computation requires an unimaginable amount of raw material.
Right. And this is where the story gets really dark. If we need this specific angular sand, and we are using it to build sprawling megacities, and we're using 50 billion tons of it every single year,
Yeah.
where exactly is it all coming from?
It is coming from the earth, through brute force. Sand is a mined resource.
Mined. We don't usually call it that.
We don't often use the word mining for it because sand feels too ubiquitous, too ordinary. When you think of mining, you think of deep shafts for coal or gold. But sand is extracted on a scale that dwarfs all other mining combined.
To visualize 50 billion tons, I saw this stat in the source material, that is enough to build a wall of sand 88 feet high and 88 feet wide, completely wrapping around the Earth's equator every single year.
It's terrifying when you visualize it like that.
So how are we getting it out of the ground?
We are dredging it from the seafloors using these massive ships called trailing suction hopper dredgers. We are digging it out of riverbeds and floodplains with fleets of excavators and massive suction pumps. We are blasting inland quarries. It's a massive heavy industry operation.
And it requires an entire invisible infrastructure just to move it. Because sand is incredibly bulky and cheap per ton, transportation is actually the highest part of the cost.
Transport is everything.
You can't just put it on an airplane. So you have this continuous massive river of diesel trucks, barges, and rail cars feeding batching plants and construction sites 24/7.
Here's where the economics get really fascinating and troubling. Because transport is so expensive, sand usually doubles in price for every 30 or 40 miles it travels on a truck.
Wait, it doubles in price that fast?
Yes, so you have to mine it as close to the city as physically possible.
Which creates a profound irony of value. I look at it almost like real estate.
How do you mean?
The worker in the riverbed, or the quarry miner, sells these grains of sand for absolute pennies. They are doing back-breaking labor to pull it out of the water. But the urban developer, just 20 miles away, uses those exact same grains to pour a concrete skyscraper, and suddenly they're selling that vertical space for millions of dollars.
That's entirely accurate.
The wealth isn't generated at the pit, it's generated in the finished city.
And because the wealth disparity is so high and the demand is so relentless, the human cost at the bottom of that supply chain is devastating.
It's grim.
When you look at the informal end of the spectrum, especially in developing nations experiencing massive construction booms, the conditions for the laborers are horrific.
What kind of conditions?
You have artisanal miners, river divers who literally plunge to the bottom of moving rivers with buckets, and shovel crews working with almost no protection. The physical toll is immense.
The list of risks is terrifying. Drowning during river extraction is incredibly common. Collapsing sandbanks that just suddenly give way and bury workers alive.
Yeah.
Heavy machinery accidents. And then there's the slow, invisible killer.
Silicosis.
Right, silicosis.
Yes, occupational silica exposure. When you crush, drill, or transport quartz sand, it releases fine crystalline silica dust into the air.
Now wait, I breathe in dust all the time. If I sweep my garage, I'm breathing in dust. Why is silica dust so uniquely dangerous?
Because of that crystal structure we talked about earlier. Regular household dust or dirt is relatively soft. Your body's natural defenses, like mucus and cilia in your airways, can mostly trap it and clear it out.
Okay, so normal dust gets filtered.
But crystalline silica dust is sharp at a microscopic level.
So it's like inhaling microscopic shattered glass.
That is exactly what it is. And when workers inhale these jagged microscopic crystals over long periods, they bypass the upper respiratory defenses and lodge deep inside the alveoli of the lungs.
Oh, that sounds awful.
The immune system attacks the silica, but because it's so tough, the white blood cells just die, causing inflammation and permanent scar tissue.
The lungs just stop working.
The lung tissue essentially stiffens. It's irreversible, it's progressive, and it literally suffocates the worker over time. It's a massive global health crisis in mining, construction, and artificial stone manufacturing.
And the tragedy doesn't stop at physical injury and disease. Because the demand is so high, And the transport radius is so tight, this ubiquitous boring material has spawned deadly cartels.
Sand mafias.
Sand mafias. When you look into who controls the extraction in certain parts of the world, there is systemic child labor, debt bondage, and literal violence, where extraction is controlled by criminal networks. I have to admit, I was genuinely shocked by this.
People usually are.
We are talking about sand, and there are mafias murdering journalists and activists over it.
It happens precisely because of that transportation cost factor we just discussed. Local supply is vital for a growing city. If a city is booming, it needs sand right now, and it needs it nearby, so transport costs don't bankrupt the infrastructure projects.
Makes sense economically.
When a resource is locally vital, highly lucrative, but governance and regulation are weak or corrupt, criminal networks naturally step in to control that choke point.
It becomes a black market because the legitimate supply either can't keep up or is restricted by environmental laws. So the mafia just take over the riverbeds by force, mine it illegally at night, and sell it to the developers.
Which leads us to the geopolitics of it all. It's not just local mafias. Entire nations are engaging in sand conflicts. The prime case study for this is Singapore.
Okay, let's talk about Singapore because this completely blew my mind. They are a small island nation with a massive booming economy. To grow their economy, they literally needed to expand their physical landmass.
They physically ran out of room.
So they engaged in massive land reclamation projects, pouring imported sand into the ocean to create new territory.
They expanded their land area by over 20% since independence.
20%?
And to do that, they imported incredible amounts of sand. At one point, over 90% of Singapore's imported sand was coming from neighboring Indonesia.
Millions and millions of tons. They were literally dredging the sand out of Indonesian waters and shipping it to Singapore to build new coastline.
But eventually, the exporting nations started looking at the environmental and political costs. Whole islands in Indonesia were supposedly disappearing or eroding away.
Just vanishing.
So Indonesia instituted a ban on sand exports in 2007. Malaysia also banned sea sand exports to Singapore.
Because the exporting nations realized they were literally selling off their own coastlines, their own physical territory, to expand the map of a rival economic power.
Exactly. Those bans prove that sand is no longer just a cheap commodity traded on an open market. It is literal physical sovereignty.
That is so deep.
When you export sand for land reclamation, you are shrinking your own country's ecological boundaries to build someone else's infrastructure. Control of sand is shifting geopolitical power in Southeast Asia and beyond.
We see the brutal toll this takes on the human body, the laborers, and the international relations between nations. But what is this 50 billion ton annual appetite doing to the Earth itself? I mean, 50 billion tons a year, that has to be completely rewriting the landscape.
It is entirely rewriting the terrain of the planet. And the core problem is that we treat sand as if it's empty space.
Like it's just filler.
Right. We look at a riverbed or a seafloor and think it's just dead filler material waiting to be scooped up. But ecologically, sand is incredibly active and alive.
What does it actually do down there?
It filters groundwater. It hosts complex burrowing organisms that form the base of the food chain. It nourishes beaches and acts as the structural skeleton for river channels.
So when we just vacuum it out of a riverbed, the entire system unravels. Walk me through the mechanics of that. If I take 1,000 tons of sand out of a river, what actually happens downstream?
It happens rapidly. Rivers operate on a delicate balance of water velocity and sediment load. When you remove massive amounts of sand, you create a hungry water effect.
Hungry water, what does that mean?
The water suddenly has more energy and less sediment to carry, so it aggressively scours the riverbed, causing it to artificially deepen.
And when the bed deepens?
The riverbanks collapse. The water undercuts the banks, causing them to shear off into the river. That immediately threatens communities, homes, and farmland situated along the river.
It's just eating away at the land.
Yes. It undermines the concrete foundations of bridges, leading to catastrophic collapses. It also alters the local water table. As the riverbed drops, the surrounding groundwater drains into it, causing local drinking wells to run dry.
And let me guess, because all that sediment is now trapped in dams or being trucked away to build skyscrapers, it never reaches the ocean.
Precisely. River deltas, like the Mekong or the Nile, rely on a constant resupply of sand from upstream to maintain their shape against the eroding force of the ocean.
So if the sand stops arriving?
When we stop the flow of sand, these deltas begin to shrink and sink. And because deltas are incredibly fertile, they are home to hundreds of millions of people worldwide. We are exposing coastal delta communities to worse flooding and saltwater intrusion just so we can build cities somewhere else.
The marine side of this is just as alarming. The United Nations Environment Program, or UNEP, tracks this. Their Marine Sand Watch data estimates that 4 to 8 billion tons of sand and sediment are dredged from marine and coastal environments every year.
It's an immense volume.
And they found the dredging is even happening inside marine protected areas. We are taking these trailing suction hopper dredgers, which are basically giant oceanic vacuum cleaners, and we are scraping the seafloor.
And as they scrape the seafloor, they suck up not just sand, but everything living in it. Microorganisms, worms, crab larvae. And then the dredger filters out the water and the fine silt, pumping it back overboard.
And what does that do?
This creates massive turbidity clouds.
Like underwater dust storms.
Exactly. Plumes of thick, suffocating mud that drift for miles. These turbidity clouds block sunlight from reaching seagrass meadows, and when the sediment finally settles, it smothers coral reefs, choking the polyps.
So it's basically killing the reef.
It destroys the spawning grounds for fisheries, devastating the livelihoods of local fishing communities who suddenly find their nets empty. It is a systematic dismantling of aquatic habitats.
Which brings us to a really dark paradox. I was reading about this adaptation cycle, and it feels like a tragic loop.
Oh, the seawall paradox.
Yes. As climate change worsens and sea levels rise, coastal cities are terrified. They are experiencing worse storm surges, so they need to adapt. So what do? They decide to build massive concrete seawalls, or they do beach nourishment, where they pump sand onto the shore to widen it, or they artificially raise their land levels.
But to do that, they need massive amounts of sand.
Right, so they send the dredgers out into the ocean to extract marine sand to build these new defenses. But extracting that marine sand destroys the coral reefs, the seagrass beds, and the natural underwater sandbars that organically protect the shore from storm waves in the first place.
It's completely counterproductive.
So my question is, are we literally destroying our natural armor just to build artificial armor?
That is the tragic irony. We are degrading the ecosystems that naturally absorb wave energy only to use that degraded material to build a brittle, expensive concrete wall that will eventually crack and fail anyway.
It's so short-sighted.
This raises an important question, perhaps the most important question in this entire deep dive. It highlights a profound mismatch of timelines.
What do you mean by mismatch of timelines?
Nature replenishes sand on geological timescales. Remember the violence of geology. It takes millions of years for a mountain to weather down, for the river to crush the quartz, and for the ocean to sort it onto a beach.
Right, millions of years.
Humanity, however, is consuming that sand on economic timescales. Decades, years, quarters.
We are spending a multi-million-year inheritance in about a century.
Exactly. And the crisis we are facing isn't that the Earth has zero sand left. Obviously, there is still plenty of sand on the planet. Look at the Sahara.
Plenty of useless sand.
The crisis is that we are running out of the right sand in the right places at a cost that the ecosystem can actually survive.
So what does the future of extraction look like? If we can't keep destroying rivers and oceans, and we can't build cities out of smooth desert sand, how do we fix it?
The solutions require a complete shift in how we govern and value the resource. UNEP emphasizes that we have to stop treating sand like an invisible, limitless commodity and start governing it as a strategic, finite resource.
What does that look like in practice?
This means much better mapping of where sand actually is, and strict, enforced bans on extracting from vulnerable ecosystems like active river channels or marine protected areas.
But mapping and banning doesn't solve the demand. We still need to build. So how do we get the aggregate? I know circularity is a big part of the solution in the source texts.
Is the main alternative.
We have to start recycling construction materials. Instead of demolishing a concrete building and throwing the rubble into a landfill, we need to crush it and reuse that aggregate for new roads and foundations.
Yes, urban mining of old concrete is absolutely crucial. We also need to get better at producing what's called manufactured sand, or M-sand.
Wait, if we can just manufacture sand, why on earth are we risking human lives and destroying coral reefs to dredge it? Is it just a cost issue?
It's cost, and it's energy. Manufactured sand involves taking massive, solid rocks from a quarry and running them through industrial crushers to purposefully break them down into the exact 2-millimeter angular grains we need.
Oh, so we just crush it ourselves.
Right. It gives you the perfect Velcro shape for concrete, but running those massive rock crushers requires an enormous amount of electricity and heavy machinery. It is significantly more expensive and energy intensive than just dragging a suction pipe along a riverbed.
So we are basically trading an ecological cost for an energy and financial cost.
Precisely. But as river sand becomes scarcer and environmental regulations tighten, the financial cost of sand is becoming more competitive. We also need smarter urban design that simply uses less concrete per building. Mass timber construction, alternative binders, rethinking how sprawling our cities need to be.
It's basically about societal maturity. Humanity has to learn that even a single grain of sand has ecological boundaries.
Yeah.
But, this relentless consumption, this willingness to literally grind down mountains, scrape the bottom of the ocean, and risk human lives just to build taller and taller towers. It reveals something deeply profound about human psychology, doesn't it? About how we view our place in the universe.
It absolutely does. When you move beyond the physical infrastructure and the economics, sand is one of the most symbolically charged materials in human culture. And it carries a very strange emotional paradox.
Because it represents two complete opposites at the exact same time.
Right. On one hand, sand is the ultimate symbol of fragility, shifting times, and impermanence. It slips through your fingers, it erodes under the waves, the wind blows it away.
A footprint in the sand is literally the definition of a temporary mark.
Exactly. But on the other hand, we have taken that exact same fragile material and used it to create our most arrogant, permanent structures. Massive concrete monoliths, dams, and towering glass skyscrapers that are designed to defy nature and outlast us all.
You see this duality everywhere in religion and folklore, too. The desert is always a place of trial, of exile, of spiritual revelation. It's an environment that strips away the comforts of civilization and leaves you vulnerable to the raw elements.
It humbles people.
It does. And yet, cultures also use sand to express divine scale. The phrase, as numerous as the sands of the sea, appears in multiple ancient texts. Because it overwhelms the human mind's ability to count or comprehend, sand becomes a metaphor for infinity.
Think about the Tibetan Buddhist sand mandala. That is perhaps the most profound philosophical use of the material. Have you ever watched them make one?
I've seen videos of it.
Yeah.
It requires an unbelievable level of focus.
It does. Monks will spend days, sometimes weeks, painstakingly placing tiny, colored grains of sand using these small metal funnels called jakpur.
Placing single grains.
Yes, they vibrate the funnels to drop single grains at a time, creating an incredibly intricate, beautiful geometric world that represents the cosmos. The labor and the precision are astounding.
It's amazing art.
And then, after all that work, once it's finally finished, they intentionally sweep it all away.
Wow.
They destroy the beautiful world they just built, mix the sand together in an urn, and pour it into a flowing river.
To teach the sacredness of impermanence. The idea that beauty and creation exist without having to last forever. That clinging to permanence is basically an illusion.
Precisely. And we have so many idioms baked into our daily language that reflect this deep understanding of sand's nature. Built on sand is a warning against unstable foundations.
Right.
We talk about the sands of time slipping through an hourglass. We describe people ignoring obvious dangers as burying their head in the sand.
So what does this all mean for us today? Because I was thinking about how children instinctively interact with sand. You take a toddler to the beach, give them a plastic bucket, and they immediately start building a sandcastle.
They just know what to do.
They don't need instructions. Why do we do that? I think it's because sand offers immediate tactile transformation. It's totally responsive to our hands. You can build a tower, dig a moat, and shape a world with very low physical consequences.
But they know it won't last.
Exactly. This is the key. We do it knowing full well that the tide is going to come in and wash it away in a few hours. We build the sandcastle anyway. It feels like a miniature, accelerated version of civilization itself. We build our cities on the coast, fully aware that the ocean will eventually reclaim them.
It is a perfect microcosm. We are constantly trying to impose order and structure on shifting material. But the psychology of sand in the modern, industrialized world has shifted dangerously away from that awareness.
How so?
Modern consumers have developed a condition of dependence without awareness.
Because it's literally everywhere. It's
Right.
in the asphalt we drive on, the windows we look through, the fiberglass in our insulation, the phone screens we are staring at right now.
Yes, and because it is ubiquitous, it becomes psychologically invisible. We don't see the sand, we just see the progress. We see the sleek glass architecture and the smooth highways.
We just take it for granted.
And that invisibility is exactly what allows us to overconsume without guilt. We emotionally associate a brand new glass and concrete skyscraper with success, wealth, safety, and modernity. We completely forget the collapsing riverbed, the displaced fishing community, the shrinking delta, and the silicosis-scarred lungs of the laborer that were absolutely required to build it.
We see the luxury of the final product, but we are totally blind to the utility and the immense sacrifice that made it possible. I want to ask you, the listener, to really think about the ultimate philosophical lesson of this journey.
It's a big lesson.
It is. The history of sand tells us one absolute truth. Civilization is granular. It is made of extremely small things, repeated millions of times until they become destiny. We tend to think of human history as these sweeping monolithic eras, the Bronze Age, the Industrial Revolution, the Digital Age, but it's really built grain by grain, decision by decision, road by road, chip by chip.
That is the deepest lesson of scale. A single grain of sand is weak, easily blown away by the wind, almost nothing. But a billion grains, bound together by chemistry and human ingenuity, become a megacity. And the choices we make today about how we extract, value, and use those tiny grains accumulate just as powerfully and just as permanently as the massive structures we build with them.
Okay, we have covered a massive amount of ground today. We started by looking at a tiny 2 millimeter piece of jagged quartz. We tracked its chemical resilience through the slow violence of geology and mountain-crushing glaciers. We watched ancient craftspeople hack its melting point to create glass, and Roman engineers use it to build an empire.
It's been quite a ride.
We saw it transform into lenses and eventually the ultra-pure silicon chips that run our digital lives. We uncovered the brutal 50-billion-ton reality of modern extraction, the hidden labor of artisanal miners, the economics of sand mafias, and the devastating ecological cost to our rivers and oceans. And we ended up staring into a Tibetan mandala, realizing that our entire modern world is built on a material that inherently wants to shift, erode, and wash away.
To close out this deep dive, I want to offer a final thought for you to mull over, one that builds on these themes of deep time, geological memory, and human ambition.
I'm ready. Let's hear it.
Consider how future geologists, say 10 million years from now, will study the Earth. Assuming humanity is long gone, they won't find our digital files in the cloud, they won't find our stock markets, our political borders, or our literature.
All of that will be gone.
But as they dig down through the strata of rock, they will find an incredibly strange, hyper-concentrated layer of perfectly sorted quartz, manufactured glass, and crushed concrete wrapping around the entire globe. It will be an anomaly in the geological record. We think we are conquering nature by mining all this sand and building our cities, but in the grand scheme of deep time, we are just creating the next geological layer for the Earth's memory. When the Earth eventually grinds our concrete back down into sand, what kind of foundation will we have left behind for whatever comes next?
It really changes how you look at the world around you, doesn't it? The next time you look through a window, or walk on a concrete sidewalk, or stare at your phone screen, remember the grain. Remember the millions of years it took to get into your hands and the invisible systems that put it there. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Take care, and we'll catch you on the next one.